Thanks for stopping by Minnesota Black Robe Regiment on YouTube and on Rumble. If you are following me on or watching this on YouTube, make sure that you go down below and you hit the subscribe button down there. You can either do it right in the screen or you can do it in the actual by the description. And if you're following me on Rumble or watching this on Rumble, you're probably already a follower. And if you're not, you can find the follow icon. I don't know how it all works. Everybody's Rumble seems to be set up a little different. We're going to talk a little bit about an experience that I had yesterday. And there's going to be some video of a conversation that I had in regards to this experience. And what I want you to understand is today as I shoot this video, it is about 11:20 in the morning, and September 27th, 2021. Yesterday was the big one, Medical Freedom Rally in St. Paul at the state capitol. Carry my sidearm with me everywhere that I go, and I don't conceal it when I'm at the state capitol for a rally or a protest. I don't have a need to. I am lawfully permitted in the state of Minnesota. We can have a conversation about that at another time. But as I was approaching the rally yesterday, well before it started, I walked across the street, and as I walked up, I said, "Sir, I'm going to need to." I hear, "Sir, I'm going to need to see your ID and your permit, please." I'm like, "Oh, okay," which I'm carrying out in the open so he can see it, and he has every right or every obligation or permission according to the state statutes to ask me for that. So I gave it to him, and he took it, and he went to one of the state patrol squads, and this was a state patrol officer, and I didn't even think to start recording at that time. I was a little put off, which will never happen again, by the way. And as I was waiting and waiting and waiting, I found out that they had been stopping everybody who had a weapon, a firearm, which there again, I can understand. They have the freedom according to the state statute. If they see you openly carrying, they can ask you to present a permit. And if you are openly carrying in the state of Minnesota, whether you agree with the constitutionality of the state statute or not, you're a moron if you're doing that without a permit, because you're going to get in legal trouble, and you're going to have to fight that at some point. And it's going to cost you thousands of dollars. To win, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars. So we need somebody to challenge the constitutionality of the law, and we need the state of Minnesota to have a constitutional carry law put on in the state statutes so that we can start doing the things the right way. Now, what I want to do is I want to so they ran my ID, and they ran my permit, and came back, and they handed me this. I'm not going to get it real up close to the screen because I got some personal information on there. And so what it says is written warning, state of Minnesota State Patrol. It says my name, my address, my date of birth, and yada, yada, yada. And the place where I was stopped, the street I was stopped on, and the county I was in, and then it lists who stopped me and who ran me. So I was stopped. I was ran by Trooper Brett Hayes of Station 2120, badge number 321 of the Minnesota State Patrol. And then I was given this, and I was told, well, it's a no action. And I said, well, it says it's a warning. Well, it's no action, though. Okay. So I walked around with this, and they told me to carry it with me so that if I got stopped again, I could just show it to them, and they could, and they would know that I didn't need to be talked to. So I did get stopped by another trooper later on, and he did ask to see it, and I started to hand it to him. He goes, okay, you're good. Thanks. I knew I was good, but that's not the point. But while I was there and I was waiting, they stopped a couple other people who were openly carrying, but a young man, and I say young because he was definitely younger than me, a young man walked by. He had no sign of having a firearm on him. He had no sign of carrying any kind of weapon that he should be checked for. And as he walked by, one of the troopers said, "Sir, are you carrying a firearm with you today?" Now, I don't blame this young man for responding with, "Yes, sir, I am," because when you get asked that kind of question, it's normal to respond to the position of authority that law enforcement officers have. But I want you to understand that Minnesota is not a stop and check state or a stop and identify state. And for that trooper to ask him if he had a firearm, he had to have a reasonable suspicion or a reasonable belief that this man was carrying a firearm. And he also would have had to assume that there was a reasonable cause to believe that the man was in some way, shape, or form possibly in violation of the law. There again, this guy there was no sign that he had a weapon. I know what it looks like when somebody's carrying and there was no sign that he had a weapon on him. This trooper simply stopped him and asked him if he had a weapon, and the man responded yes, and then they ran his ID. Now, you're not obligated to answer those questions just because someone asks. You don't have to answer those questions according to state law. You're never obligated to say, "Yes, I have a weapon on me." "No, I do not." In a traffic stop, you do not have to answer that. Now, they can run your ID, and that will show that you have a weapon, and then they can come back and say, "Do you have your weapon with you? And if you, and can I see that you have your permit and whatnot?" But you are not obligated as you're walking down the street. If somebody comes up to you and says, "Sir, do you have a weapon on you today?" You're not obligated to answer that question, and you're not obligated to prove it or not prove it. And he can't just stop you and ask you. Now, there again, we want to be compliant. We want to treat these people who work in these positions with respect and with the dignity that they should be afforded as human beings. The problem, however, is that the higher ups are giving these orders. And there again, I was open carrying, which I'm entitled to do in the state of Minnesota. There is nothing that says I cannot carry a weapon in the open as long as I have my permit with me, period. I am not required to cover it, conceal it, hide it. I am not required to keep it out of view of the public, but I also have to understand and be patient and demonstrate a willingness to comply with the question if I'm going to have it out in the open. That's it. If you do not have a weapon out in the open, they can't ask you. Well, they can if they want, but you're not obligated to respond. And they're not they're not authorized to ask you for ID. You have to understand this. Civil, peaceful, polite, treating the officers, treating deputies, treating patrolmen with dignity that they are afforded as human beings and fellow citizens in the United States. They are civilians. Okay, law enforcement are not. They may work in the public sector, but they are civilians like you, and they take an oath to defend and uphold the Constitution. And we're going to read this. We're going to read the Second Amendment here. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right of the people shall not be infringed. Now, we can have a little bit of a conversation, if you will, about do these laws. We can have a conversation about whether or not laws and statutes by states that require you to have a permit to be able to carry a firearm on your person at any time, concealed or open, is an infringement on the Second Amendment. I would argue that it is. And the state, if you will, the government has been able to get around that by saying it's for the protection and the good of the people. Now, remember, Plato said that the rise of every tyrant, the root of every tyrant is that he comes to be your protector. However, it's just it's untenable to me that anybody can see this in any other way, and then to try to make the argument that a well-regulated militia means the National Guard is hogwash. There was no such thing as a National Guard at the time when the Second Amendment was put in place. They were completely convinced that people should have firearms in their own homes for their own protection, not from criminals, but from a tyrannical, overreaching state, so that they could assemble and form citizen militias to be able to resist tyranny. That's what it was all about. But what I also want to point out is one of the reasons why Minnesota is not a stop and check or stop and ID state is that there has to be a reasonable suspicion that you've committed a crime. And the Fourth Amendment covers this. The Fourth Amendment reads this way: the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, let's go back here, because there's been some argument. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Now, some people say, well, that means your property and whatnot. No, the Fourth Amendment is very clear. It is your person as well. You have a right to be free of unreasonable search and seizure, which is why there's been a lot of argument and debate and back and forth on whether or not stop and ID and stop and frisk and stop and search and all of that are allowed. And people hailed Rudy Giuliani in New York and saying that his stop and frisk initiative through the New York Police Department really cut down on crime. And I would say, sure, it might have cut down on violent crime during that, but it was actually a crime itself. You have the state has no authority to just walk up to you and say, hey, you look like a thug, you look like a criminal, you look like someone that might commit a crime, so we're going to ask you for ID and we're going to frisk you. And that's why stop and frisk had to stop in New York. It was illegal. It was unconstitutional. And therefore, according to Marbury versus Madison, it was repugnant to the Constitution and therefore not valid at all. Watch this video, the conversation that I have with the captain of the State Patrol and a couple of other senior ranking individuals on site. I have a quick question if somebody can answer. You're like, go talk to them. We're off. I do have one. So earlier when you guys, they were running our permits and stuff, and they handed us the warning, and they said it's a no action. Is that in the system now? Like, I was stopped and checked and everything. I'm not trust me, I'm the furthest thing from a criminal you could get.
Yeah. No, it's just in there as a subject stop, not as like a traffic stop or anything like that. And
I'm sure you can understand why I'm asking.
Yep. All of that, it all goes with data retention schedules that we go by, and
okay. I understand also.
Yep.
So to answer your question, for 2 years, anytime we enter a name in there, for whatever reason, whether you're in a crash or whatever, it just says subject stop.
I get it. I would never give you guys a hard time. I know
policy requires the trooper to give you a piece of paper that says ticket warning or no action. So if you want to file a complaint or whatever, you can do that. That's why.
I'm sorry, that was distracting. No, like I said, I don't want to give anybody a hard time, but I'm just like.
See, it's kind of a catch-22. We prefer not to hand out anything, but then people don't know
who's been talked to or
who talked to you. People aren't
like, no, I was talked to. Sure, you were.
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't.
So that's how it goes about. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to have to be the guy that's got to deal with this every day. So, but
we're hiring 100. So if you're ready to change careers or something.
I'm 51 next week, bro.
That's all right.
So, and
60.
I just left the law enforcement world. I respect what you guys do, which is why I would never give you a hard time. But I'm over here going, I'm going to ask about that one
like
just in
case.
Another
law enforcement agency stopped you. No, it's not in there, right? It's just our internal.
It's your internal.
Your name.
That was for me. I'm going.
Yep.
what's that going to look like if for some reason I got a headlight burned out on the way home and somebody stops me and go, you just got stopped for a weapons violation?
No, it doesn't.
No, but I'm thinking to myself, like, that's never
It's just
happened
dangerous
before.
to
So,
subject stuff.
but thank you seriously for what you guys do. I mean, guys and gals, I'm sorry, I should probably not use the guys in the more
It's all
amorphous
good.
way.
Sure,
so.
she gets it all.
It's all good.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Isn't she in charge? You guys,
A lot more rank on this.
well, you guys have a great night, and thanks for everything you do.
Now,
So,
after you've watched that video, I'm going to emphasize something. Yes, higher ups in the state patrol, higher ups at the state capitol that are in charge of security and whatnot may have ordered that this happen at the event on Sunday. But what I'm going to tell you is at some point, somebody has to stand up and say, I will ask anybody who clearly has a weapon, clearly identifiable, has a weapon on them, firearm on them. I'm going to do what the state statute says, which is I'm going to ask them to present that. But any trooper who stops somebody that walked by who wasn't clearly carrying a weapon and asked them if they had a weapon and then demanded that they produce ID and permit was out of line. It's out of line. Now, this video is probably not super exciting, but what I want people to understand is you do not have to answer that question. And the troopers have to say at some point, Captain, head muckety muck, I'm not doing that. And here's the kicker. They stopped the guy that was walking by me. We weren't affiliated. We didn't know each other. They certainly couldn't tell whether or not we were affiliated or knew each other. And even if they could, we have a freedom to associate with people. And that in and of itself does not give them cause to ask him whether or not he has a weapon. And the second part of that is, how do I want to put this? They were very selective in who they asked. Many, many, many women walked by during that process, and not one of them was asked. I had walked one of the nurses who was going to, we call her Nurse No Jab. I had walked Nurse No Jab from the parking lot up to the state capitol, and they stopped and asked me for my ID. And then they stopped this other young man who had no sign of having a weapon on him, if he had a weapon, but they did not ask Nurse No Jab. Now, with the clothing that she had on, she could have very easily have had a weapon, but they didn't ask her. And at some point, the troopers have got to stand up and say to one another and to their superiors, I'm not stopping and asking every single person. That's an infringement. It is 100% absolutely an infringement. And they're not allowed to do that. And shame on them for the ones who did. There again, carry a weapon in the open, you'd better have the permit. Fight that in the court later on somehow, but you better have that permit and you better have ID. But if they ever stop you at a rally or an event and say, hey, do you have a weapon on you? Say, I'm not obligated to answer that question, and you're not authorized to detain me for not answering that question. Civil, peaceful, respectful, treat them with dignity, but they cannot ask you if there is no reason to believe that you're about to commit a crime or have committed a crime. And just being present at a rally or at a protest does not mean that you are guilty of something. That's what the implication is. And I'm going to ask, take January 6th out of the picture. How many people who have been involved in violent protests in the state of Minnesota, let's say burning down half of Minneapolis and rioting and looting, who have then later gone on to other Black Lives Matter and Antifa-related events and protests and marches and whatnot, how many times have they been stopped? Because I guarantee you, if they had been stopped, it had been all over the media, and we're not hearing it. The media would have covered it as police abuse of authority, abuse of power. Is the media going to talk about what I'm talking about here? Once again, you carry a weapon in the open, you better have the proper permit. You had better have the ID. You had better have all your ducks in the line on this one.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
But if you do not have a weapon that is easily observed, clearly concealed, in the sense that it's concealed but easily seen, and they just ask you, do not answer the question, say thank you, have a good day, and keep going. And then if they detain you, make sure you're recording. Because they cannot search you without probable cause. Period. They can't. They cannot search you without probable cause. And just walking by is not probable cause. Once again, civil, polite, respectful, guarded. Treat them with dignity. But we've got to stop this garbage. And at some point, the rank and file are going to have to stand up and go, no, it's my duty to not do that. Let's see how this plays out. Thanks for watching. Until next time, Sic Semper Tyrannis.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.